Hey guys, so over the years, many of you have written into us and asked us how to go about convincing your parents to let you own a reptile as a pet.
And usually throwing a temper tantrum does not work with our parents, so we decided to give you guys some guidelines on how to persuade your parents that maybe getting a reptile isn't such a bad idea after all. So one of the first objections that parents often have is, what if your reptile escapes?
And that's where you're going to need to take the initiative and be prepared. You see, if you get an allowance or if your parents pay you for doing chores around the house, something you may want to do ahead of time is to go ahead and price a secure cage that is made for the type of reptile that you intend to keep. Go ahead and save up the money until you have the money for the terrarium that is properly designed to keep reptiles in and prevent escapes, and then present the idea and show your parents that you've been responsible enough to save up your own money in preparation for purchasing, and that will go a long way to convince your parents that maybe you are going to be a responsible pet owner. Here's a tip for you kids. If your parents are scared of you having a reptile because they're afraid that it might escape and eventually it does escape,
then your parents don't have anything to worry about because you don't have a reptile anymore.
Okay, so one of the objections that many parents have to reptile ownership is simply the expense.
Depends on the reptile. Not all reptiles are like ball pythons, for example. Some ball pythons can cost anywhere from $50 to $100, and others
you could refinance your home in order to afford them. So there's a reptile out there and a price range for everybody. In fact, one of the most awesome pet lizards, the bearded dragon, you can purchase for under $200 for the reptile, and that includes having it shipped to you. So the cost, when you compare that with a horse or even some of the purebred dogs, reptiles are relatively inexpensive pets.
And our next objection is that the reptile may get too big. And this is kind of similar to the one we just answered. It has a lot to do with what kind of reptile you want.
There are reptiles out there that get very, very large. Some of the lizards get very big. Some of the snakes get very big. Certainly, I don't think anyone's going to be asking for a Nile crocodile or a saltwater croc for a pet. But,
an anaconda, maybe.
Or maybe an anaconda, yeah. But there's a lot of snakes out there, like the corn snakes, the king snakes, the milk snakes, that are very small and can live their entire life in a 40-gallon terrarium. Also, there's a lot of lizards like leopard geckos and bearded dragons and things like that stay relatively small. Now, while we certainly don't recommend the large pythons like retics and Burmese for children's pets, there are a lot of things out there that are absolutely suitable for a child to have as a pet.
And the parents' last objection may be, well, I'm probably going to be the one that takes care of it in the end.
You know what? Sometimes that's probably true, but I know many a reptile keeper that started out loving the hobby because they took over taking care of a son or a daughter's reptile. So, however, kids, I gotta tell you, this is on you. You've got to be responsible enough that your parents can't have this for an argument.
Not only are you responsible for your homework, but also making sure you take care of the animal afterwards.
I will say this too, when it comes to reptiles, that is one of the really good things about keeping a reptile. For example, let's say you have a leopard gecko, a bearded dragon, or a corn snake for a pet, and you want to go on vacation for a week. You don't have to hire a pet sitter to come over every day and feed and water and walk your reptile. So for that reason, the care requirements of a reptile are very, very minimal when you compare it to other animals such as dogs, horses, bunnies, those types of things. This is little bonus material that you can use when it comes to reptiles as pets. Now, one thing about reptiles is, for the most part, I've never even heard of an allergy associated with reptiles. I've never known anybody to be allergic to anything when it comes to keeping reptiles as pets.
Yeah, I will take over here for a second, because if you guys watched our last video, you will know that I have really bad allergies. I've mentioned this a couple times on this channel actually. So I've never been the dog person. I'm not one for dogs and cats and bunnies and things like that. And that's mainly just because I'm allergic to them. I can't have them as pets. So reptiles are my pets. They're a way for me to keep my pets without sneezing and having allergy attacks constantly. So if you're someone who has really bad allergies, reptiles are perfect pets for you.
Absolutely. I second that part. I'm highly allergic to cats. Can't be around them. And I have never found a lizard, a turtle, a tortoise, a snake that I was allergic to. So for that reason alone, reptiles do make great pets. And now your parents may object and say, but wait a minute, you're not allergic to anything.
Well, you might have a friend that is allergic to dogs and cats, and so when they go over to your house, it's just courtesy, you know?
Don't you want your kids to be popular?
I mean, all kidding aside though, my best friend, when I go to her house to spend the night, she has to vacuum her room because her dogs like to walk around in her house, and I'm so allergic. Every time I go over there, she always vacuums everything for me, so she puts up with a lot.
You're so needy. All right, so another objection is, well, I don't want to have to feed it. And when it comes to feeding a reptile, it's not all that difficult. Reptiles, unlike dogs and cats, usually don't have to be fed every single day. Reptiles have low metabolisms that can allow them to go for a very long time in between feeding. For example, if you have a pet king snake, you can spend 2 to 3 weeks in between feedings. Now, we don't recommend that, especially with young growing king snakes, but once again, they lend themselves very well to people who have busy lifestyles and don't have to feed their pet reptile every single day like someone who owned a dog or a cat or a horse, for example.
Yeah, and if you want to go on vacation for a week, it's okay if you leave your snake at home and they don't have any food.
When we talk about feeding a reptile, it doesn't take huge amounts of food. Unless you're feeding some like the large pythons, like the reticulated pythons and the Burmese pythons. You know, those guys can eat big rabbits, but most reptiles are going to feed on small mice, frozen thawed, very convenient to buy and to feed those. If you're getting dragons, they'll eat insects and greens. The leopard geckos that are very popular eat insects. And they're just not as problematic to feed because their diets are usually not that varied. Even the big pythons like the Burmese and the retics, they're never going to get big enough to demand a large amount of your income in order to feed them. For example, our large pythons usually eat a rabbit to 2 rabbits once a month, and the cost to feed one of those is about $25 to $30 a month. That is a whole lot less expensive than it is to feed something like our Doberman Pinscher.
Or even a kid. I mean, come on.
Reptiles are cheaper than kids.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd have known that. Parents, if your kids are considering getting a reptile, now we say this as a joke, but reptiles kept me out of a lot of potential trouble when I was a kid, simply because instead of running around getting in trouble with my friends that sometimes can do some stupid things, especially in their teenage years, I was out in the woods hunting under logs, trying to find snakes to photograph.
And another thing you don't have to worry about with reptiles is there is no house training.
That's exactly right. No training to use a litter box, no letting them outside in the middle of the night.
And another thing, reptiles do not bark in the middle of the night and wake up all your neighbors.
When it comes to reptiles as pets, one of the things that make them very appealing is that in most cases you don't have to get a pet deposit. If you're renting an apartment or a place, if you have a dog or a cat, many places require a pet deposit, sometimes which can be up to as much as the first month's rent. However, many apartments and things will allow caged animals such as birds, fish, and reptiles without worrying about a security deposit whatsoever. If you have a child in your household that knows how to handle snakes, well, you're going to do a public service for all your neighbors, because after all, who are they going to call to come over when they've got a wild snake swimming around in their swimming pool? All right, kids, I'm going to give you a pointer here because this is going to work on any parents. Trust me, take my word for this. If your parents argue about a reptile being expensive, just remind them that if they get you a reptile, you'll spend the vast majority of your allowance on reptile keeping, and you won't have money to use drugs with and end up like this guy.
Oh, you drive a motorcycle, man. I drive a van and eat Little Debbie's. Oh, man, y'all got a lot of little danger noodles, and my parents wouldn't let me have snakes when I was a kid. That's pretty groovy, man.
Kids, if you have presented all of these arguments and they worked, give us a message down below. Let us know if we helped you out in convincing your parents to let you own a reptile. However, I want to say this. If even after seeing this video, your parents are still adamantly against you keeping a reptile, the most important thing that you have is a relationship between you and your parents. Don't ruin that by throwing a temper tantrum or being a total brat. Honor your mother and father, and you'll have a much better relationship between the child and the parent. Be patient and wait. Who knows? Maybe if you have a better attitude about it, it'll go a long way toward changing their mind in the future.
Absolutely. And if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and we will see you guys in our next video. Bye. You're easier than children, people. Come on. Don't you press the button, child.
You won't have money to use drugs with and end up like this guy.
Wait. Hold on a second. Oh. You pointed to me and you were like, and I was like, hang on.
The insect and hang on a second.
You can say
Peace, love, and happiness, baby.